Welcome back to the Bernard Lee Poker Show. We are talking with five-time WSOP bracelet winner, and latest win was the 2022 $10,000 7-card stud championship at Bally's Paris. That's right. For those of you who obviously have gone to the World Series for years, Binion's Rio, 17-year stint there, and now Bally's Paris. Adam, let's talk a little bit about this move. I've asked several people, had them on my show talking about it. I'd love to know your thoughts. You've played obviously at the Rio for years, and now moved over to Bally's Paris. What are your thoughts about the transition? The people were skeptical initially and kind of cautiously optimistic, but now that it's happened, what's kind of your thoughts?
I was amongst that group. I thought it was going to be a complete disaster. I always loved dinner breaks over the Rio, being able to go over to Chinatown and just eat amongst the thousands, what feels like thousands of different restaurants. I always thought the parking situation was a fantastic situation. It was away from everything. It's easy to get to, easy access. And I thought going to Bally's Paris, it was going to be an absolute nightmare driving in every day. So much so that this is the first time in 16, 17 World Series I didn't rent a car. I didn't want to deal with a parking situation. I figured I'll just Uber or Lyft everywhere, and I just didn't want to deal with all of it. I thought it was going to be absolutely awful. Turns out it hasn't been a problem when coming in off the 15 or coming off the back or coming in through the back entrance through the airport on the back end in order to get to the Bally's Paris garage. Plenty of parking inside. It's been easy to get in and out whenever I've caught a ride from a friend or two. It's been easy in terms of getting dropped off from using Lyft or Uber every single time. Inside, it's been pretty fantastic as well run. I mean, the rooms are enormous when playing in the Paris Ballroom or in the Bally's in the back behind the hotels or the hotel rooms itself. It seems like there's been no hiccups at all. And, I'm the first to criticize the World Series when I think they've made mistakes. But I've got to give them credit. I think this has been on a scale of 1 to 10. It's been right around a pure 9.5 the whole way through. There seem to be plenty of food options for people on dinner breaks. Again, I don't play really any of the 11 o'clock no limit events, so I don't have to deal with the dinner breaks as often. I only really have them on day twos of the 3 o'clock events. So I've only had to deal with that half a dozen times or whatever it's been when I've been fortunate enough to get that far into a tournament, regardless whether it's been a 1,500 through the 50K PPC event. So food hasn't been a problem when I've had to eat whenever I've had to eat there. It's been pretty smooth overall. The big room in Paris, maybe I can't visually see it, but apparently it's like a million times bigger in the main room than the pavilion over at the Rio. And I can't seem to see it like everybody else. I mean, but yeah, there's like 100 more tables in there. But yeah, it's been pretty fantastic overall. So I'm the first to say I was wrong. I thought it was going to be a disaster. It's been pretty great, actually. Who knew?
Yeah, you got to give your props to Jack Effel and his entire team, Ty Stewart, et cetera. And I agree with you. So for me, I didn't care about the parking. I usually stay there. I was very worried. I love the Rio rooms. People complain about it all the time. Listen, I like room. I mean, I'm going to be there for 2 weeks. I want to spread out. I don't want to feel cramped in a hotel room. I want to be able to relax. I like that there's a couch in the Rio so I can just sit down there and watch TV. I really like, having people up and just talking about stuff. I just really like that atmosphere. I don't really care about the parking because I didn't have a car anyway. And, like you said, with regards to food, it's nice to be able to go off if you want to go off and et cetera. So I was definitely cautiously optimistic and, didn't want to hear all the complaints, but I think a 9.5 is probably pretty solid and pretty much spot on. There was an issue with regards to the Bally's air conditioning early on, but I mean, with that many people, there's always going to be some issue.
I think they got that corrected in like 3 or 4
right
days.
Away. And listen, the one thing I will say is the sweatshirts were not sold out. And for people who were at the Rio for many years, you know what I'm talking about. It was freezing in the Rio all the time. You couldn't wear shorts. You couldn't wear flip-flops because your feet were so cold, but it was very comfortable. I would usually bring a very light over shirt, and it was more than enough. I actually wore shorts a couple of times. I never, ever wear shorts.
Same here. I've either worn sweatpants or I've worn shorts just about every day. Doesn't seem to make much of a difference for me either way.
Right. And like I said, the food options, not only are the food options better in Bally's Paris, I mean, just that alone, but then you just literally walk off the strip and you can be there in 5-10 minutes. And there's all these other possible locations. The spot that we're in, it's Bellagio, Flamingo, there's all these other places right there as well, that are very quick and you can get food right there. I will also say, I know you didn't stay there, but I've said this before in a couple of interviews and a couple of shows that we've done. I stayed at Bally's. And by the way, I thought the rooms, I knew that they had redone them. I've been at Bally's before, but I had forgotten how big they were. They are much wider than a normal room. So you really feel comfortable that way. And then also I timed it from my room to the Bally's conference center where the poker rooms were, less than 5 minutes. And I was not right next to the elevator. I mean, you at the Rio, for you to go from the poker room all the way back to your room, up the elevator, back down, if you had a 20-minute break, you literally ran to your room, went to the bathroom and ran back. And hopefully that the elevator wouldn't stop every floor so you could get back in time. I did it once. I said, let's give it a shot and see what happens. Went back to my room, went to the bathroom, looked at my watch. I go, I still got 13 minutes. I mean, this is unbelievable. And so I sat in my room, literally grabbed a drink, turned on the TV, chilled for about 5-6 minutes, comfortably walked down, still had 3 minutes left to go. So that's the nice thing with regards to that. So I agree with you. I applaud them. I'm very happy with the switch, and I'm now, a converter and excited that this is where the home of the World Series will be. And hopefully for the next, 10, 20, 30 years, or if not indefinitely.
I mean, there's no reason to think, based off the success of the first year, that it'll be there at a bare minimum 10 years. Yeah. Going forward, who knows with contracts and everything else, we're not privy to that information. So who knows? I mean, maybe
we don't know the expansion.
It's very possible we're playing here until we die. It's very possible we're playing here until we die.
Exactly. Until the next generation takes over from where we are. So
I'm true. The next generation is probably playing in some casino that hasn't been built yet.
Yeah, that's right. Right. It may be in a solely World Series casino, right? WSOP casino. Let's talk a little bit more about some stud strategies. Obviously, you won your 5th bracelet here. You won your first bracelet 2012 in a 7-card stud high-low. Obviously, we talked about it, 3 bracelets in a row in the 10K dealer's choice. We talked a lot about those strategies previously. For those of you who did not hear that interview, go backwards in time to my podcast or onto my YouTube page, youtube.com/Bernard Lee Poker, and you can see those interviews as well. But let's talk a little bit more about 7-card stud strategy. Let's start with just beginners. So for people who are playing 7-card stud, they kind of understand the concept: 2 cards down, 1 card up, 3 more cards up. So there'll be 4 cards up total. 7th card is down. The 3 cards, which is a start, and the 4th card, those are small bets. And then 5th, 6th, and the 7th street, which is the last card down, are big bets. That's basically what the betting pattern is for 7-card stud high. Low card has to bring it in. It doesn't have to be the complete small bet. It's usually a bring-in bet, which is about half of the small bet. And then someone can complete it or not. So just kind of giving a literally 45-second overview of 7-card stud. What's kind of what you would think maybe a little bit of a beginner strategy for people who are wanting to improve on their 7-card stud strategy?
I'd say keep it really simple for the most part. You want to start out with the split pairs, big pairs that are wired or split either way.
So for just real quick, so for people who don't know what that means, split is that one card is showing. So if you have an ace up and an ace down, that's a split pair. Wired means that you have whatever card up, let's say it's a 5, but you have the 2 aces down. Those are your down cards. So those are wired. So just so people understand the terminology for you, if you don't know what 7-card stud is. Sorry, go ahead.
The funny thing is, this is going to sound really silly, but in the movie Rounders, when Matt Damon's character is talking to the professor about when, hey, yeah, you're officially no longer invited to our poker game early on.
Right. Yeah.
He basically tells him what the player left. For the most part, that's not the world's worst advice to start with when playing 7-card stud.
Yeah.
You want to play pretty tight ranges. You don't want to be in there. I mean, when you start playing the ace, king, nines, which again, I'm not saying, I mean, obviously I do that, but this is thousands and thousands of hours later, where I understand what it is, why I'm doing in this thing, and hands that I know I can rep and misrepresent going forward. But you want to keep things as straightforward as possible. You want to play live 3 flushes when possible. It's okay to play the up and down 7, 6, 5s, but again, like previously mentioned, you want to be able to make certain those 8s and 4s specifically are really live.
Right.
If you're playing them, if you see 2 8s and 2 4s out, it's a dead-ish type hand. Not that you can't make it, but you're not going to make it anywhere near as often as if all 8 cards are live just to get open-ended by 4th or 5th street. You want to when you got the big pairs, you want to try to get the hand heads up as quickly as possible. So if someone raises, re-raise, try to do everything in your power, because having aces hold up in 7-card stud high is much more difficult than having aces hold up and limit hold them. Limit hold them, no matter what, you're going to be 80%, you're going to be 82% or bigger, no matter what, every time going in. That's not the case in 7-card stud high. Your aces are never 82%. And if there's 3 players,
I think I want to make sure people understand is that in limit hold'em, because it's your 2 cards and the community cards are shared by everybody.
Exactly.
Right? So you basically are playing your 2 cards, now these cards. In stud, you're playing your cards and your opponent are playing their cards. So it can change really quickly.
There are no shared cards whatsoever.
Exactly.
You're playing your cards, you're playing their cards. So for example, so say you raise split aces and someone say calls, let's say with the 10 of clubs up. And let's just say my 5th street, their board reads 10 of clubs, 9 of clubs, 8 of clubs. Oof. And all you have is aces. You're in such a defensive mode at that point. Right. Now you're playing a guessing game. Did they start split 10s? Do they have the flush? Do they maybe have a pair like 2 5s in the hole and they're just with or without a 4th club? And they're just going to now represent and barrel through the whole way through. Sometimes you're just going to give up your ace on 5th street. Sometimes what thousands of hours will get you is what your instincts are going to tell you what's correct. I tend to be a little bit more conservative than some others in some of the spots, but I do realize whenever I do tend to call down, I seem to be right a pretty high frequent rate. Probably makes me think I should probably call down a little bit more often occasionally, but in a tournament, you're better off being a little more cautious in tournaments. This is because no matter what the tournament game is, no limit, pot limit, stud, draw, hold 'em Omaha. Saving bets is much more important than making bets.
Right.
Always has been, always will be.
Let's talk a little bit about that point. You stopped specifically at 5th Street, 10 of clubs, 9 of clubs, 8 of clubs. 5th Street being the first time where the big bet comes in is such a critical decision. To me, there's 2 spots. 3rd Street, which is the starting one, whether you play your hand or not, or 5th Street, because that's where the big bet is. Often you make the call on 3rd Street, you're at least going to 5th Street. You make the call on 5th Street. Yeah, more often than not. Of course, there are situations, a paired board or whatever, but you go to 5th Street and you make that call. Majority of the time, you end up going to at least 7th Street and seeing it. Talk a little bit about the importance of 5th Street and making such a critical decision there of playing or not.
Yeah, so again, the one big difference between stud and limit hold'em or limit Omaha to better is it's a half bet before the flop, a half bet on the flop, and then it's a full bet on the turn, a full bet on the river. The difference between stud and the difference between that and stud is you still have the 2 half bets on 3rd, 4th, but unlike a full bet on the turn river where you have just 2 full bets on 2 different streets, it's 3 streets, 5th, 6th, and 7th. So the mistakes that you make on 3rd and 4th can be minimized if you're out by 5th Street. 2 half bets just equates to 1 big bet. But if you're wrong on 5th or 7th, that's 3 big bets as opposed to limit where it's 2 big bets. And not that that's not, then again, it's going to be big regardless in a tournament. situation. But if you're wrong frequently, you're going to lose more money in stud games than you are in flop games. And then if you start putting in incorrect raises in, now much more money gets in.
Right.
In those situations. So, Third Street, you want to be able to make sure you're playing the correct starting hands in the right situations, not just depending on what you have, but also depending on what cards are out. But come Fifth Street that's when the real money gets in. No less than 75% of the money gets in from Fifth Street on. In stud games. So you better be sure where you're at come fifth, because again, you're going to be folding on fifth, and they're going to be sometimes you just fold on Sixth Street, and that's all right too. But I mean, for the most part, you're getting to Seventh Street, and then Seventh Street, someone's betting, and then you're getting 10 to 1, 11 to 1, 12 to 1, 13 to 1 on your money. And yet what's awful is more often than not, when you get bet, you're beat probably 95, 96%, which doesn't even cover the 10, 11, 12 to 1.
Right.
But yet you find yourself end up calling, well, I put all this money in, I got to call, one more bet. Just show it to me. And yet they're like, shake their head. They look down their whole cards, throw it away.
Right.
So decisions that could have been made on Fifth Street by folding that earlier can save you more money on the long term and make you a more profitable player, both in cash and tournaments.
Sure. Right. And like you said, exactly what you were talking about is not only 75% minimum on fifth, sixth, and seventh, but if raises start coming in, now that number starts getting bigger and bigger, and you're really getting into trouble. Talk a little bit about maybe playing a little tricky in the sense of check raises or whatever it might be, especially on Fifth, Sixth, Seventh Street, or maybe even like Fourth Street. I find Fourth Street a very interesting spot because you can raise, and even though you are raising there, it's only half a bet. So it looks more dangerous than it is, but it still has the impact. So anyway, I'm just throwing those kind of thoughts out to you to of see what your thoughts are with regards to raises, et cetera, in 7-card stud.
Yeah, so in 7-card stud high, I mean, again, like I said, there's a lot of representation by misrepresentation. So sometimes maybe I'll put in a raise on Fourth Street when it's heads up, when I feel like I'm gonna get a free card on Fifth Street more often than not. Someone would say has a Queen Jack show, and maybe I got 7-5. Maybe I have a hand like 7-7-5-4 with the 3 to a gut shot. And I figure more often than not, come Fifth Street, even if they catch like an offsuit 3 or whatever. I mean, if I don't think they have the Queen or Jack or whatever, I'll fire out on Fifth. But sometimes I'll just check in order to get a free card. So by raising Fourth, I'm raising that in half bet, which will save me a half bet on Fifth Street. So instead of putting a full bet on Fifth, I'm saving a half bet. And then sometimes I'm raising a 4 flush on Fifth Street or on Fourth Street when the hand's heads up, because my hand is supremely live. Maybe I've got 8 or 9 outs in order to hit my hand, and then I'm just wanting to gamble. Put some extra money in order to try to hit my flush against what sometimes could be an obvious. We're up against an obvious pair of queens, but maybe you're up against a pair of queens. So maybe you have an ace or king of the hole, to where now you can just make a pair of ace or kings, and as well as your flush, and you're actually a favorite in that spot on Fourth Street. So sometimes I'm doing it to get a free card. Sometimes I'm doing it just I'm just going to raise, and I'm just going to barrel the whole hand through, to where it's a little bit of a trickier bluff. But again, like I said earlier, you got to be careful who you're doing this against.
Right.
So again, sometimes you're doing to represent exactly what you have. Sometimes you're misrepresenting what you have. You're repping one thing when in reality you have something completely different altogether. Right. And all I can say is, I mean, it sounds like I'm saying some of the same things over and over, but especially in 7-card style, all I would say is you got to put the hours in, plain and simple. Whatever I say is not going to have much meaning to anyone out there who's barely played any 7-card stud high. It's a game you really need to put the hours in order to see all the nuances yourself, just because whatever I say, it really doesn't have any meaning if you haven't really played much before. So all I would say is just get in there, play, figure stuff out on your own. As even if you're playing, like, it doesn't matter. Even if you're playing like again, I don't know how many $3, $6 games still exist at casinos. I don't know how much that exists still around the country now. But if there still is some of those games in the East, and I don't know if there are, in any game you sit in, whether it's $3, $6 limit, $1, $2 no limit, all the way up to playing in Bobby's room, there's always going to be a player you perceive as the best or second best player in the game. And for the most part, if you ask that person a random hand or two, they'll generally tell you more often than not. You'll get the occasional person who just doesn't want to tell you anything because they're afraid it's going to cost them money. And I get it. For the most part, I genuinely tell people what I think. Maybe it's one or two individuals I just refuse to tell something to. But it's okay to ask the person who you perceive as the best player in the game, and maybe they'll tell you something that that makes sense. And then you try something out, maybe, and then you end up using that in your game, or maybe you say, you know what, doesn't seem to work for me, and that's okay, because maybe that person's right, maybe he's not.
Also, I think you said this previously too, is that not only could you ask that person, but if you really generally feel like that person is one of the best in the game, is really watch them and watch the cards they play and how they bet and all that kind of stuff, because you really can learn a ton. I will tell you that I did that a lot in Deuce to Seven when I first started, especially in No Limit, watching what they played, how they played it, how they made certain calls that I would never have made and not thought to. And then fortunately, some of them were buddies, and I asked them, so why'd you make that call? And, whether it's a polarizing bet or whatever, that's a different game. But would you agree with that, to like really watch how they play, what their starting cards are, et cetera?
And it's funny you say that. So like there was a hand in the 50K PPC this year in No Limit single draw where Max Coleman raised under the gun, and it folds to me in the big blind, and I got dealt 4 to a 9, but I got dealt a pair of nines. I think I had a 97 draw. Maybe it was 97 or 96 draw. I wasn't straightening or anything. Now, because I got a pair of nines, and he's raising under the gun, if he's Pat, he can have anything from a 7 to a jack, obviously.
Right.
But if he's drawing 1 and he's raising under the gun, because I have 2 nines, the likelihood is now he's drawing to a much better hand than myself. Probably drawing to a 7 or 8, almost certainly. Mm-hmm. So it was a hand where I ended up making my 9. Actually, made a decent. I think I made a 97 if I remember correctly. It's a hand I would normally bet out, but it was also a spot to where I knew if I bet and he raised, I could almost be certain either maybe he had a pair of 8s and maybe he caught a 38 or something, so he could be bluffing that, or it's just a spot where I know he's drawing better. So a spot where I would normally bet a 97 there. That was a rare situation where I checked into him because I know he's drawing better, and I figure if he's at it, all right, whatever, and if he's bluffing, I want to keep his bluffs in too. He ended up betting like 80% pot, and I just felt he had it, but my hand's just way too good. Obviously he could have had a 9 as well, but
sure.
It turned out he had an 8, which didn't surprise me at all because I had 2 of the 9, so it's 2 less nines, and because I don't have an 8 in my hand, the likelihood is he's drawing to an 8. That makes it much more likely.
Right.
So that was a spot where you got to be careful. You want to always beware of the cards that are out. Obviously, no limit single draw compared to stud. You only know the 5 cards that are in your hand that are out of the 52 cards. Stud high, when you're initially playing at a full ring of 8 players. You know the 3 cards that you have, plus the 7 cards are out. So instead of 47 cards, 47 unknown cards, you got 42 unknown cards. You have a little bit more information that's out.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And you need to use all that to your advantage when you're playing, just to be aware at all times. What's out. All right. So what things are more likely in those scenarios?
Sure.
You go from there.
Perfect. Yep. Adam, congratulations. What a run you've had. We've known each other way back, ever since our 2005, both our deep runs in the main event, and what a career that you've had in it. You just turned 40, correct?
Say it again. Remind me.
Say it again. But the reason why I'm saying it is actually a reason. And I did put this in a column with regards to that I've written for Cardplayer that will be coming out with regards to the World Series Poker Hall of Fame. And I said, look at the people who just recently turned 40. You're one of those people that I put on that list. It's a discussion about the backlog of the Poker Hall of Fame, et cetera. Is this something that you are thinking about and hoping to one day be a part of?
I mean, yeah, it would be nice again, but it's not a priority, and I don't think about it really ever. I mean, it's a little political, which people who they know there's a lot of political that goes on. You have to suck up to certain people, which is not me at all. I just let whatever I've done. It's been for the satisfaction of me and those that are close to me. If I get acknowledged for it one day, great. And if not, I'm not going to lose 5 seconds of sleep on whether I get in the Hall of Fame or not. Like I said, I've been very adamant that I think Brian Rast deserves to get in at 40 years old. And I know, I think Rast, Anthony Zeno, myself all turned 40. I don't think I compare to. Zeno's got a great resume. I guess mine's pretty good, but I think what Ryan Rast has done is uncomparable to any of these people coming up. I think the only one who has maybe a comparable resume maybe is Scott Seaver. Rast has beaten No Limit, Pot Limit, Omaha, Mix, cash, online, heads up, mix, high rolls, everything. If he can't get in as a first ballot Hall of Famer at 40, nobody going forward should get in at 40.
Right.
And all due respect to a person, say like a David Peters, for instance, who's just a no limit hold'em tournament player, his resume doesn't compare to someone like Rast, who only plays no limit tournaments. And maybe he is, maybe someone like Peters is the best no limit tournament player that's ever existed. But he's only done it in one area only, not even in cash, not even any other games. So if Rast can't get in 40, nobody can get in at 40. And with only one person getting in, whether it's a player or someone who's contributed to the game, someone like a Matt Savage or a Norman Chad, amongst those players. If only one person's getting in, then I'm not holding my breath on getting in anytime soon with players who have much better resumes than myself, who are in their mid 30s coming up. And so, if I get in, great. If not, I'll be perfectly content. I'm very satisfied with what I've done with my career, and both in cash and tournaments. And I'm not done yet. And we'll see what the future holds in that.
Yeah, well, I think you wrapped it up well. I mean, like, it's just difficult right now, and that's kind of where the column was. And I think that's where, eventually there will have to be some kind of discussion. I agree with 100% agree with you with Brian Rast. I would say Michael Mizrahi's in that same category where how is this person not, brought in on the first ballot, and it's just going to be years, and it's just going to drag on for a long time. So we'll see how that works out. But more importantly, let's celebrate the good part and the good news. 4 in the last 4 WSOPs, 5 overall. Incredible accomplishments, and we hope to just keep having you on after more and more. Adam Friedman, thanks so much for joining us here, and congratulations once again, my friend.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on once again.
Adam Friedman here. We will continue our interviews as we continue to wrap up the 2022 WSOP. But as always, may you always go in with the best hand, and may you never get unlucky. Good night, everybody.